We stand at the threshold of a new era in space exploration. Space may be vast, but as we seek to explore it, it is imperative that we not only seek out new destinations, but that we also enable safe and sustainable pathways to get there.
This was Arti Holamaini, director at UNOOSA, speaking at the opening session of Space Resources Week 2024. But let's step back for a second. A small nation on the global map, Luxembourg plays a central role in the field of space. With the creation of the Luxembourg Space Agency in 2018, and then in 2020 the inauguration of the first research and innovation centre focused on space resources, ESRIC, the small Grand Duchy is no longer renowned only for its financial services and European institutions. In addition, Luxembourg is also hosting the event of reference that has recently concluded its 6th edition, Space Resources Week. This year's conference brought together the community comprised of key actors from academia, research, space agencies, industry, as well as the UN Expert Group on Outer Space Affairs, UNOOSA. In this episode of Resourceful, we have invited Dr Kathryn Hadler, director of ESRIC, to tell us more about the outcomes of this conference.
The key takeaways have been just how much our sector is moving on in terms of maturity, in terms of confidence of what we're in what we're doing. And that's been really remarkable to see from the first meeting I went to in 2018 at STech through to 6 years later. We see a maturing of the ideas, the science is becoming much more rigorous, the technologies are becoming better developed, the businesses are more certain about their models. And I think that gives us our overall sense of progress.
I'm Hanna Siemaszko and you're listening to Resourceful, a podcast which explores the exciting new opportunities of space resources. Resourceful is produced by ESRIC in collaboration with Silax.
What do we mean by space resources? If you have been following previous episodes of this podcast, you will certainly be aware by now that our focus is on the in-situ use of these resources from space, used in space. From a pragmatic point of view, the near-term opportunity is for the in-space utilization of resources to support space exploration. Are sustainability and circularity just nice to have, or are they the only way? Let's see what Vlada Stamenkovic, Senior Director Space Resources at Blue Origin, thinks.
So the important thing is that really being in space, living in space, working in space, you gotta be able to never come back. You don't have to. And so for me, IRCU and space resources is not just something that reduces costs, makes things better. It is the difference. If we don't implement really IRCU and use space resource, we're going to always fall back to the Earth. We're never going to leave the Earth. And there is no sustainability without IRCU. It's not a nice to have. That's what we need to understand. Sometimes you have to go the extra mile to really enable what's needed. And so as long as we don't accept that IRCU and space resource is a requirement, we will not be successful.
One of the big discussion points this week has been what we mean by sustainable space resources. And broadly, we can break it down into three key aspects. So economic sustainability for the companies that are involved, sustainability in terms of decoupling space exploration from terrestrial resources, and then sustainability in terms of the environmental legacy that we leave. And on all of those topics, these have been lots of discussion about what that means, how we work towards this, and how we can, as a community, ensure that we are doing space resources in the right way.
The European Space Agency has intensified its efforts to prioritize sustainable space exploration. Here's Joseph Aschbacher, the Director General of ESA.
Exploration is very high on the political agenda of ESA, but also worldwide. On the ESA side, or in Europe, we have published last year a report called Revolution Space. This was really a milestone in defining and in discussing with the member states and with the community what needs to be done, where Europe needs to position itself in the global context, which moves very fast, and what we can do and what we shall do in Europe. And I'm discussing this with my member states quite intensely.
For me, the European approach is more cautious in some ways. I think that NASA have a very clear direction of travel. So with the US sector, they know where they're going, they know how their missions look. For us in the European community, we have different drivers, different motivations, and I think we have a much more steady approach to space resources. That's not to say that we are not as dynamic or as big or as ambitious, but I think it's just a different environment in which to work. That being said, I think that what we have in Europe is a really lovely community. With Space Resources Week every year, it's lovely to see the same familiar faces. We are progressing. We bring in new people all the time.
From a scientific point of view, we must consider that there are significant differences between the Earth, the Moon, Mars, or simply space. Aspects such as different gravitational forces, presence of vacuum, or harsh environments hostile to life challenge the current state of the art and can not only enable further space exploration, but also directly benefit life on Earth. And it is research based on these concepts that ESRIC is focusing on, funded by the Luxembourg National Research Fund.
If we look at the technologies and concepts around the harnessing of resources and use of resources in space, then there's lots of ways in which those technologies can enable, improve life on Earth. One very clear example is the use of water in mining. We use huge amounts of water in mining to separate minerals. We don't have that opportunity on the Moon. If we want to separate particles, the dust that coats the surface of the Moon, the regolith, if we want to separate that in some way, either by mineral, by size, then we have to do that without water. And those concepts can be transferred to Earth. There's other concepts as well, such as robotic mining. We can look at rethinking the entire process from the beginning. On the Moon, we cannot produce any waste as such. Everything must be used because we're dealing in pristine environments. So the opportunity or the need is to develop processes and technologies that essentially leave no trace. So we minimize the use of waste. Everything is done in a circular economy way, and that we look after the environment in which we are looking to explore, so we can conserve it for future science. All of those concepts and technologies can be transferred to Earth to rethink some of our conventional approaches to resources. So now not only are we discussing technology, but also discussing actually what should we be doing? How do we minimize the footprint of operations on the Moon? How do we minimize our impact?
As we discuss technology and business in space resource extraction, the Earth mining companies would come across as a natural ally. With all the discussions revolving around sustainable approach to mining, the mining companies may appear to be perfect addressees of innovative solutions and new revenue streams. Or so it seems.
This question keeps arising. How do we bring the terrestrial mining sector on board? And again, in the 6 years, we see the position shift slightly. So originally, everybody was saying, the terrestrial mining sector, surely they must be interested in this. New markets, new opportunities, they're interested in resources. And then you realize that, no, of course they're not interested. They're not interested really because there is no current market. They deal in markets that are today, and that the scale is significantly different to what we do on Earth. I mean, we mine 20 million tons of copper every year. We're talking about, tens of tons perhaps of oxygen at some point in the future. So the uncertainty and the risk is too high for the terrestrial mining sector.
Although Kathryn highlighted the winding paths of seeking cooperation with the terrestrial mining industry, there are companies that manage to get their foot in the door. Here's how Gordon Wasilewski, the head of R&D at Off-World Europe, describes this cooperation.
It's a good relationship. It's a demanding relationship, challenging relationship. It's very hard to open these doors and keep them open. but it's something that those mining companies are truly interested in, which is a good sign.
To find out more about Off-World's activities in the field, check out our previous episode in which Carl Acciono takes us through the company's business. So what characterizes the space business sector the best? In the words of Jerry Sanders, In-Situ Resource Utilization System Capability Leadership Team Lead at NASA, it's
a collaborative competition.
What a strange concept, you may think. At the same time, the businesses that want to be successful in space need to be particularly tied to one another. They're also very much dependent on space agencies. Collaborative competition, you said, Jerry?
Competition is required. You want new ideas, new investments, new ways of doing business. But at the same time, we all have to kind of bootstrap each other to begin with. And so how do we collaborate in the basics, the resource assessment, the standards, the interfaces, the proving grounds, so that we can all develop things and have a chance to, compete later on. So on the one side, there's a lot of consortiums that are being built up. The other is obviously government agencies. So we work with many other government agencies to try to figure out how can we collaborate, how can we provide a framework in which we can all work together, but at the same time allow companies in our respective countries to elevate upwards.
Space agencies as an initial customer is not necessarily a problem. Actually, we do need initial customers, and if that happens to be the space agencies, then I think that gives us a place to start. And this is a discussion that happens a lot, is about anchor customers. What is the role of the space agency as a customer? But over time, what we would like to see is that shifts. So we start with space agencies perhaps as the main customer, but then other entities come in to provide other revenue sources. And I think that model seems the most likely given what we currently know of space resources. The space agencies play a really critical role in being an anchor customer, in providing that initial incentive in order to kickstart the whole space economy.
Space Resources Week brought together also the UN Expert Group on Outer Space Affairs, UNOOSA, during an expert meeting which aimed to collect preliminary inputs for the international conference in Vienna.
It was a real honour to speak at that UN expert meeting. I think it was great to have that meeting in parallel with Space Resources Week, because the more we bring together those who work on the more technical aspects of space resources and the legal experts, I think the better an understanding we have of both sides. So for me, it was an enormous privilege, and it was really interesting discussion, really interesting to listen to the comments, the questions from those representatives from the UN expert group. One of the main takeaways from that is that actually we need to do this more. We need to have the science and technology experts, those people from industry who are looking to make these activities commercially viable, and those from the legal side, because unless we have these discussions, we will just continue along in parallel tracks.
Stephen Freeland, Emeritus Professor of International Law at Western Sydney University, Professorial Fellow at Bond University, and the Vice Chair of the Working Group on Legal Aspects of Space Resource Activities, seems to be on the same page as Kathryn.
It was agreed that we would have a series of conferences feeding into a formal conference in Vienna in a couple of weeks, where we would invite countries to nominate experts, non-legal, hopefully, although we obviously want to hear from lawyers as well, but non-legal experts to start telling us what is possible, because I always say, how can you regulate for the unknown if it's completely unknown?
Fast forward to the future. Are you interested in the latest developments in the regulatory landscape? Then don't miss our next episode fully devoted to this topic. And if I told you that space exploration is the ideal place where you can start anew, where the mistakes we made on Earth can be corrected, here's Kathryn.
When I first entered this field, the topic of conversation was always, right, we're going to go to space and we will extract the resources, we'll, support space exploration. And it was very much what's the science and technology that we need to make this happen? How do we make our visions of harnessing resources in space to support exploration, to support the lunar economy, the new lunar economy? How do we make this happen? And then you talk to other people outside that community and you realize, actually, this is not accepted by everyone. And certainly there are cultural issues around our proposed approaches to harnessing the moon's resources as well. The opportunity here, on the other hand, is to think through all of those problems, learn the lessons of the issues that we've created on Earth, so that we can rethink what we do on the moon. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity, because it's not often you get to start again. If we're going to do this, how do we do it properly? And what are the technologies and the approaches we need to do this properly?
There are so many missions going outside of the Earth's orbit, to the moon and beyond, the potential of which we cannot yet fathom. We have intelligently used space technologies not only to reach faraway destinations, but also to start exploring them in a way that we could not have done many decades ago. We must now be smart about how we move forward. We have a chance to get it right, and we owe it to ourselves and to future generations to do so. The commitment within this community is vital in guiding those discussions and decisions that will shape the management of space resources and activities for the future.
Be part of the conversation. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with your friends and subscribe to our channel. If you want to find out more, follow us on social media and join our annual Space Resources Week conference. Until the next episode, stay curious. This series is brought to you by the European Space Resources Innovation Centre, ESRIC, supported by the Luxembourg National Research Fund, FNR. It is produced in collaboration with Silex.